The babies were breathing, crying, and aging backward. Dr. Sarah Reeves stood frozen in the abandoned nursery, watching as the identical twin infants visibly transformed before her eyes, their skin smoothing, their bodies shrinking, regressing from what appeared to be 3-month-olds to newborns in just minutes. The child psychologist had been called to investigate an abandoned facility deep in the forests of Argentina, but nothing in her 20 years of clinical practice had prepared her for this impossibility unfolding in real time. The nursery had been discovered by local authorities following an anonymous tip about strange noises coming from a compound that was supposed to have been abandoned since the 1970s. What they found was a fully functional medical facility hidden beneath a modest farmhouse. The basement extended far beyond the footprint of the house above, revealing a labyrinth of sterile corridors, examination rooms, and, at its heart, this nursery, with 2 living, breathing infants inside, despite no record of the facility being occupied for decades. Sarah's hands trembled as she approached the first crib. The infant inside had stopped crying and now gazed at her with eyes that seemed impossibly cognizant, impossibly ancient. When she reached toward the child, its tiny hand grasped her finger with surprising strength. The touch sent an electric chill up her spine. This was no ordinary child. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, cold enough that her breath formed visible clouds in the air. Dr. Reeves was not just any child psychologist. She was the head of pediatric trauma research at Johns Hopkins University, specializing in developmental abnormalities and the psychological effects of medical experimentation on children. Her work had taken her to the darkest corners of human history, from declassified CIA documents on childhood conditioning experiments to the haunting records of concentration camp survivors. But this discovery threatened to unravel everything she understood about human development. The compound had been discovered 3 days earlier, but the authorities had kept it tightly under wraps. When the first responders entered the nursery, 2 of them immediately vomited. Another fainted. The police chief described entering the room as walking into a physical wall of wrongness. The babies didn't just look strange, they affected people physically. Officers reported pressure in their ears, nosebleeds, and sudden, inexplicable feelings of dread and despair. The local authorities quickly realized they needed specialized help. The twin in the second crib started crying again, a wail that didn't sound entirely human. Too melodic, too structured, almost like a pattern of communication. Sarah moved toward it cautiously. Unlike typical infants, this one tracked her movements perfectly, its head turning to follow her with precision that should be impossible for a newborn. More disturbing still was the nameplate on the crib. Not a name, but a designation. Subject 14B, Temporal Reversal Protocol. Sarah checked the first crib. Subject 14A. Identical twins, apparently, part of the same experimental protocol. But what exactly was temporal reversal? And how could these infants be alive in a facility abandoned for nearly 50 years? The nursery itself was a bizarre blend of 1940s hospital equipment and technology that appeared far more advanced. Devices Sarah couldn't identify, with digital readouts in a language she didn't recognize. The walls were lined with observation windows of thick glass, behind which sat monitoring equipment. Most disturbing were the careful, meticulous notes handwritten in German in a journal next to the cribs. The last entry dated June 3, 1974. As Sarah flipped through the journal, her blood ran cold. The handwriting was immediately recognizable to anyone who had studied the history of Nazi medical experimentation. She had seen it before in archives, in documented atrocities. It belonged to Josef Mengele, the angel of death of Auschwitz, who had escaped to South America after the war and had allegedly drowned in Brazil in 1979. But if these notes were authentic, he had continued his monstrous experiments for decades after the war ended. "Dr. Reeves, you need to see this," called one of the forensic technicians from across the room. He stood in front of an open freezer unit, his face ashen. Inside were dozens of small, vacuum-sealed containers, each containing what appeared to be umbilical cord tissue. Each was labeled with a sequential number, followed by either A or B. The highest number was 23. "Where are the other 44 subjects?" the technician whispered, his voice cracking. The answer came in the form of a heavy metal door they discovered behind a rolling bookshelf. It led to another room, a cold storage facility. Inside, arranged in neat rows, were 44 tiny glass coffins, each containing the perfectly preserved body of an infant. 22 pairs of twins, all with the same face as the living babies in the nursery. Some appeared to have died from surgical procedures. Others showed no external cause of death at all. "They're all identical," said the forensic technician, who had followed Sarah into the cold storage room. "Genetically identical across all pairs. These aren't just twins, they're clones." Sarah's mind was racing. Cloning technology hadn't been developed until the 1990s, with Dolly the sheep. Yet here was evidence of human cloning from decades earlier. But that was impossible, unless Mengele had somehow been decades ahead of modern science, working with knowledge or technology that defied conventional understanding. The local medical examiner, Dr. Elena Vasquez, joined them, holding printouts of preliminary tests. "That's not even the most disturbing part," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We carbon-dated tissue samples from the deceased infants. The results make no sense. According to the isotope decay, these infants are between 70 and 80 years old." Sarah felt the room spin around her. "That's impossible. They can't be older than—" "I know," interrupted Vasquez. "We ran the tests 3 times. Either our equipment is malfunctioning or these infants were born during World War II. A sudden wail from the nursery interrupted them, a dual cry from both infants simultaneously, as if responding to some stimulus only they could detect. The 3 rushed back to find both babies arching their backs in identical motions, their skin taking on a strange, almost translucent quality. Before their eyes, the infants seemed to be growing smaller, younger, as if rewinding through their development. One of the monitoring machines had activated on its own, displaying scrolling numbers and graphs. Dr. Vasquez approached it cautiously. "These readings, they're monitoring chronological displacement. If I'm interpreting this correctly, these infants are moving backward through time at a molecular level." Sarah felt her scientific mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. "That's not possible. Nothing can reverse entropy on a biological system." "And yet," Vasquez gestured to the cribs, "we're watching it happen." The babies had now regressed to what appeared to be one-day-old newborns, their umbilical stumps fresh and unhealed. But they didn't stop there. To the horror of everyone present, they continued to grow smaller, their features less defined, reversing past the newborn stage toward what could only be described as late-term fetuses. "We need to stop this," Sarah said urgently. "They'll disappear completely." She rushed to the machines, trying to decipher the controls. Most were labeled in German, but some had symbols she didn't recognize at all, geometric patterns that seemed to shift slightly when viewed directly. One large switch was labeled Stabilisierung, stabilization. With no better option, Sarah pulled it down. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Both infants convulsed, their tiny bodies rigid with pain. Then, as suddenly as it started, they relaxed and began crying normally. The regression had stopped, but now they appeared to be stabilized as newborns, their development frozen at the moment of birth. "What have we done?" Vasquez whispered. What was Mengele trying to do here? The answers began to emerge as they translated the journal. Mengele had become obsessed with the concept of reversing aging, believing it was the key to immortality. But his experiments took a darker turn when he discovered what he called chronological displacement, the ability to manipulate an organism's position in time without physically moving it through space. According to his notes, he had created the clones using DNA from a single source, described only as the vessel, and had somehow induced a state where their biological processes ran in reverse. Rather than growing older, they grew younger, reversing back toward the moment of conception. Once they reached that point, he would reset them, causing them to begin aging normally,
only to reverse the process again. A perpetual cycle of renewal. But something had gone wrong with this final pair. Mengele's last entry described a breakthrough that had occurred unexpectedly.
The twins had synchronized their temporal displacement, creating what he called a closed causal loop. They would never fully disappear or fully mature, but would cycle continuously between states of being. More disturbingly, he noted that they had begun to exhibit non-local consciousness, appearing to communicate with each other and influence electronic equipment without physical contact. As if to confirm this observation, the lights in the facility suddenly flickered, and all the monitoring equipment activated simultaneously. The temperature dropped even further. Both infants turned their heads in perfect synchronization to stare at Sarah. And then they spoke, not with the cries of newborns, but with clear, articulated words in German, their tiny mouths forming sounds that should be physically impossible for their undeveloped vocal cords. Der Doktor kommt zurück. The doctor is coming back. The forensic technician collapsed, blood pouring from his nose and ears.
Dr. Vasquez screamed and backed against the wall. Sarah alone stood her ground, though her entire body trembled. "What are you?" she managed to ask. The answer came not in words, but as a sudden flood of images in her mind. Glimpses of experiments, of Mengele's face aged far beyond the photos from the 1970s, of technologies impossible for their era, of something else behind it all, something using Mengele, something that had been trying to enter our world through what he created. Sarah saw visions of a realm beyond time, where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. She saw Mengele making contact with entities that existed in this timeless void, beings that promised him knowledge in exchange for creating vessels they could inhabit. The infants weren't just experiments in reversing aging. They were doorways, bridges between realities. The visions stopped as abruptly as they began, leaving Sarah gasping for breath.
She became aware of a new presence in the room, a team of men and women in unmarked black tactical gear, wearing strange protective amulets around their necks. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the infants in specialized containment units and gathering all documentation. Their leader approached Sarah. "Dr. Reeves, I'm Agent Collins with the Special Containment Division. This facility is now under federal jurisdiction. You and your colleagues will be debriefed and required to sign non-disclosure agreements." "What is this?" Sarah demanded. "Who are you people really?" Collins looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "We're the ones who clean up when the impossible breaks through. This isn't the first Mengele site we've contained, and I doubt it will be the last. He had help that wasn't human." "The infants are not infants," Collins interrupted. "Not anymore. What's in those cribs hasn't been human for a very long time. They're vessels, doorways, and we need to close them before whatever is on the other side comes through completely." As Sarah was escorted from the facility, she caught a final glimpse of the nursery. The containment units holding the twins were being loaded into specialized transport vehicles. One of them had cracked slightly, and through the opening, she could see that the infant inside no longer looked like a baby at all, but something else, something with too many limbs, too many eyes, folding in on itself in ways that defied three-dimensional space. That night, in her hotel room, Sarah discovered a small folded piece of paper in her pocket that hadn't been there before. On it, in childish handwriting, were words in English. "We are everywhere. We are everywhen. We will find you again." Investigations into the compound revealed documents suggesting that Mengele had not been working alone. There were references to a group called Die Glocke, the bell, named after a purported Nazi wonder weapon that supposedly manipulated time and gravity.
The group had apparently continued operating long after the war, funded by a network of former Nazi sympathizers and later by a multinational pharmaceutical corporation interested in anti-aging technology. But the most disturbing discovery came when authorities attempted to trace the DNA of the clones. The genetic material matched a sample in an international database. It belonged to a man named Thomas Reichmann, who had been born in Brazil in 1979. The same year Mengele allegedly died. Reichmann was a renowned physicist who had mysteriously disappeared in 2021 after claiming to have developed a theoretical framework for temporal manipulation. The implications were staggering. Had Mengele somehow cloned himself?
Or was there an even more impossible explanation, that Reichmann was Mengele, his consciousness transferred into a younger body, continuing his work across decades? Further investigation into Reichmann's background revealed troubling inconsistencies. Records showed he had attended universities in Germany and the United States, earning doctoral degrees in theoretical physics and molecular biology by the age of 22, an almost impossible feat. Colleagues described him as brilliant but secretive, often making references to scientific principles decades before they were discovered. Most disturbing were accounts from his research assistants, who claimed he sometimes spoke German in his sleep and occasionally referred to events from World War II as if he had witnessed them firsthand. One former colleague, Dr. Werner Klein, agreed to speak with investigators on condition of anonymity. Reichmann wasn't just ahead of his time, Klein said.
It was as if he had already lived through the future and come back. He would solve complex equations without showing his work, claiming the answer had already been proven. Once, during a late night in the lab, I found him talking to himself in German. But when I recorded it and had it translated, it wasn't modern German. It was an obsolete dialect from the 1940s. The compound itself yielded more disturbing evidence. Hidden in a lead-lined safe were 16 film reels dating from 1945 to 1974. The footage showed the progression of Mengele's experiments, from crude attempts to manipulate cellular regeneration in concentration camp victims to his later, more sophisticated work with cloning and temporal manipulation. In one particularly disturbing segment from 1968, Mengele is seen performing surgery on what appears to be himself, extracting tissue samples that are then processed through unknown equipment.
The camera pans to show an infant in an incubator, connected to the same equipment. The vessel accepts the transfer, Mengele says in German. Continuity is maintained. I will persist. The most recent reel, dated just days before the facility was apparently abandoned, shows Mengele speaking directly to the camera. He appears unnaturally aged, his face gaunt, eyes sunken, but burning with fervent intensity. They promised immortality, he says in German, but not as I understood it. My consciousness moves backward and forward through vessels I have prepared. I am trapped in a loop of my own creation, but they are using my work to create something else, a door. The children are not aging backward. They are becoming unstuck from time itself, existing in all moments simultaneously. The entities on the other side call this temporal omnipresence. If they achieve it fully, they will be able to enter our reality at any point in history. The film ends with Mengele looking over his shoulder in terror, as if seeing something off camera. His last words before the film cuts abruptly, "They're coming through already. God help us all." The compound was destroyed in what was officially reported as a gas explosion 3 weeks after its discovery. All records were classified. The 44 deceased infants were cremated in a special facility designed to ensure complete molecular breakdown. But the 2 living subjects were never officially accounted for. Agent Collins and his entire team were reported missing 2 days after transporting them to a secure facility in Nevada. When authorities reached the destination, they found the building empty, all electronic records erased, and a nursery rhyme written in German on the walls in what appeared to be human blood. 6 months later, hospitals across South America began reporting cases of women giving birth to identical twin boys who aged normally for 1 day before beginning to age backward.
In each case, the mothers claimed to have been visited in dreams by an elderly doctor who promised them special children. By the time authorities connected the cases, there were 17 pairs of twins, all genetically identical, all exhibiting the same impossible biological reversal. One of the mothers, Maria Fuentes, agreed to be interviewed. "He came to me in dreams for months," she said, her eyes distant. "An old doctor with kind eyes. He said my babies would be special, that they would change the world. He told me they would never truly die, that they existed outside of time. I thought it was just a strange dream, but then I discovered I was pregnant with twins, despite having no partner. And when they were born," she trailed off, tears streaming down her face, "they speak to me sometimes, in my mind. They show me things. Terrible things. The doctor isn't who he pretended to be. And the babies, they're not babies at all." Maria was found dead 3 days after the interview, her body discovered in a ritual arrangement surrounded by strange symbols drawn in ash. Her twins were missing. The official cause of death was listed as suicide, despite clear evidence of impossible physical contortions that had broken nearly every bone in her body. Sarah Reeves was called back as a consultant, but when she arrived in Buenos Aires to examine the first new pair of twins, she found the hospital room empty except for 2 cribs. Inside each was a folded piece of paper with childish handwriting. Both notes contained the same message. "Time is not a line, but a circle. He found the way back. We are his children and his creators. We will all be reborn." 3 days later, Dr. Sarah Reeves disappeared from her hotel. The only evidence found in her room was a journal written in her handwriting, documenting experiments she had never performed, dating back to 1943, and a photograph showing her standing alongside Josef Mengele in what appeared to be the recently discovered compound, a photograph that carbon dating confirmed was over 70 years old. Most disturbing of all was video footage from the hotel security camera. It showed Sarah entering her room alone at 11:17 p.m. At 2:33 a.m., the camera captured 2 small figures leaving her room, what appeared to be identical twin infants walking upright with the coordination of adults. They looked directly at the camera, their faces splitting into impossible grins that extended far beyond the natural limits of human anatomy. Then they vanished from frame, not by walking away, but by seeming to fold into themselves, disappearing into thin air. The investigation expanded as similar cases began appearing worldwide. In Tokyo, a researcher studying longevity disappeared after reporting strange dreams about twin children. Security footage showed him entering an elevator alone, then exiting accompanied by 2 infants. Neither was ever seen again. In London, a historian specializing in Nazi occultism was found in his office, his body twisted into impossible angles, surrounded by thousands of pages covered in childish drawings of twins and complex mathematical equations that leading physicists described as a blueprint for manipulating the fabric of time itself. Perhaps most disturbing were reports from a nursing home in Brazil, where an elderly patient claimed to be Josef Mengele himself. The man, who had been admitted under the name Pedro Hochbauer, repeatedly told staff that he was just one version of Mengele and that the others are coming. DNA testing confirmed a familial match to the Mengele family line, though not a direct match to Josef Mengele's known DNA. The day after these results were confirmed, Hochbauer disappeared from his locked room. In his place were 2 infant boys, both exhibiting the same aging reversal phenomenon. A classified task force was formed to investigate all connected incidents, codenamed Operation Janus, named after the Roman god of doorways, transitions, and time. Their findings, leaked by an anonymous source, suggested that what had been discovered was not simply a Nazi experiment gone wrong, but evidence of a long-term infiltration by entities existing outside conventional space-time, using Mengele's work as a means of entering our reality. According to the leaked documents, the entities, referred to only as Chronos parasites, were capable of moving consciousness between bodies and through time itself. They had used Mengele's obsession with immortality and genetic manipulation to create suitable vessels, the twins, that could exist in multiple time frames simultaneously, allowing the parasites to spread throughout history. The task force theorized that the real Josef Mengele had likely been compromised as early as 1943 during his time at Auschwitz, and that what appeared to be his subsequent life was actually the first manifestation of a Kronos parasite in human form. Each clone, each temporal experiment, was not an attempt at human immortality, but at creating more entry points for these entities to infiltrate our time stream. The leaked report ended with a chilling assessment. Evidence suggests temporal contamination has already occurred at multiple points in history. Artifacts matching the advanced technology found in the Argentina compound have been retroactively discovered in historical records dating back to ancient Egypt.
We may be witnessing not just an invasion in our present, but an infiltration of our entire human history occurring simultaneously across all eras. The task force was officially disbanded 3 months after its formation, with all members reassigned to unrelated posts around the world. Unofficial reports suggest at least 7 of them later gave birth to identical twins. The case remains officially unsolved. The phenomenon of aging backward twins continues to be reported, though most cases are quickly contained and removed from public record. The latest reported incident occurred at a children's hospital in Madrid, where medical staff discovered that 2 seemingly normal newborns were actually the same infants that had been reported missing from Argentina months earlier. Their genetic profiles matched exactly, despite being born to different mothers, thousands of miles apart.
Most disturbing of all are reports from temporal physicists who claim to have detected anomalies in the Hadron Collider experiments, moments where particles appear to exist simultaneously in multiple states, defying fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. These anomalies began precisely on the day the compound in Argentina was discovered, and have been increasing in frequency and duration ever since. The investigation remains open. The children continue to be born. And somewhere, in facilities hidden from public view, researchers continue to study the phenomenon that defies all natural law. Infants who age backward, carrying within them memories that haven't happened yet, and the consciousness of something waiting on the other side of time. The true horror may be that this invasion isn't beginning now. It may have always been happening, across all of history, with our perception only now catching up to a war that has been waging since the beginning of human existence.
The twins aren't a new phenomenon. They've always been here, watching, waiting for the moment when the door between realities opens completely. Recent reports suggest that children born worldwide on specific dates, the solstices and equinoxes, have begun exhibiting unusual behaviors. Parents report their infants speaking in their sleep in languages they've never been exposed to, primarily ancient German dialects. Some claim their children know things they couldn't possibly know, describing events from history in vivid detail. Others report their children simultaneously experiencing the same dreams, despite being separated by thousands of miles. Are these the next generation of vessels? Is the invasion accelerating? Or have we simply become aware of a process that has been unfolding since the beginning of human history? Do you believe time only moves in one direction?
Have you ever experienced moments where reality seems to slip? Where you remember things that haven't happened, or forget things that have? Look at the children born on the dates we've mentioned. Do they seem different to you? Somehow older than their years? Leave your experiences in the comments below, and share this video if you dare. Subscribe to dive deeper into the forbidden history they don't want you to know. Because some secrets are buried for a reason, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.